Hello 1001, welcome to the last unit of the course, Unit 5. So we just finished our investigation and study of human identity and its relationship with evolution and ecology. And now we're going to be focusing primarily on ecology itself. So what is ecology? Ecology is the study of how organisms act with each other, so species interactions, and how they interact with their non-living environment. So how do species basically make a living in the given environment that they live? This is really sort of the study of how life works now. The famous evolutionary biologist Theodore Jansky once said that if evolution is a play playing out over time, ecology is the stage on which that play takes place. So we're looking at present interactions and present sort of processes. And these obviously have implications for how species evolve, and how species have evolved have implications for these ecological processes, but we're going to be focusing primarily on the modern day processes, the current sort of interactions. But we're going to start with the basic unit of ecology, which is the population. And so this section, the first section we're going to be looking at, actually covers quite an extensive investigation of populations. It takes two tracks. One is chapter 15, which takes a very evolutionary sort of focus on populations, and there we'll be learning about how populations evolve. We've seen a little bit of this when we looked at sort of how populations of bacteria adapt to environmental conditions, namely antibiotics. But we're going to be kind of expanding that understanding and look at how populations can both adapt to a given environmental change. This is through the process of natural selection. So natural selection drives adaptation. There are different types of selection that can occur, and you'll learn about those. You'll also be looking at how populations can evolve randomly. So we call this genetic drift, and this is simply random changes that happen in a population over time that lead it to change the underlying gene frequency in that population. And that, strictly speaking, is evolution. Evolution is simply the change in genetic frequency in a population over time. This has dramatic consequences for species because what it can ultimately lead to is genetic divergence between two populations. And if you get enough genetic divergence between two populations, what you end up with is two different species. So we'll be learning about how genetic drift and natural selection acting on isolated populations can result in the formation of new species. This goes back to the very idea that Darwin was interested in, which is the origin of new species. How do new species evolve from a single species, right? Well, it happens at the population level. All evolution happens at the population level. It's the process of populations becoming different enough that they ultimately become unable to reproduce and share genes, and then we call them separate species. The second part of this unit, or second part of this week, we're going to be talking about how populations behave in an ecological context. So we'll be looking at how population growth rates, we'll be looking at what limits population growth rates, we'll be looking at what kind of resources are necessary for populations to grow and what kind of limits those resources impose on populations. We'll be looking at different characteristics of populations, in terms of exponential versus logarithmic growth, and getting at really this concept of carrying capacity. So what are, like I said, the resources that limit a population from reaching a certain size. So these are we're kind of merging two different processes of, there's my cat trying to get in on the video. We're going to be merging really two different kind of fields. One is what we call population genetics. There she is. And the other one is population ecology. They interrelate, and so it's important to kind of study them holistically and try to take from one and learn about the other. The other big thing this week that I want to emphasize is, as my cat will attest to, you have a big lab assignment this week that's very important, not just for your own grade, but for your peers' grade. So you're doing a peer review activity this week. You're going to be asked to review two of your peers' draft proposals, and we want you to provide as helpful and thoughtful feedback as you can. It's important that you be Nice computer fell asleep. It's important that peer review is an essential part of science. It is the fundamental activity we do in science to ensure that quality science is presented to the public. And so we want you to take it seriously. You will be graded on how well of a job you do. So please provide useful feedback. You can be critical, but be constructive, okay? That's the key thing about being a good peer review person, is that you need to be constructive. Don't just say this is wrong, say this is wrong. Here's how you might improve it, all right? So that's it for the week. That was a little bit long. If you have any questions, please email me or Lindsay. All right, have a good week.